After more than 40 years, Sioux City, Iowa authorities have charged a man with slaying in connection with the 1983 demise of Terri McCauley. In September 1983, 18-year-old Terri McCauley met with some friends in downtown Sioux City, Iowa, and never came home. Terri, a young mother of two and member of the Momohara tribe, was last seen alive getting into a white Chevy Nova in a parking lot in the early morning hours of September 26th. Before climbing into the car, Terri told the two friends she was with that she was going on a date. The white male driving the Nova headed north on Omaha Street and then west on West 8th Street. On October 1st, her mother contacted the Sioux City Police Department and filed an attempt to locate report to find her daughter. With no success, Terri's mother filed an official missing persons report on October 5th. Terri's body was found less than 24 hours later on a gravel road near 33rd and Pavonia Street, off of Floyd Boulevard, by a resident walking his dog. She lay along an unkept dirt road, mostly naked, and had been shot point blank with a 20-gauge shotgun blast to the face. Her shirt and shoes were found near her body. The investigators collected evidence for DNA analysis, but due to very hot temperatures and decomposition to the body, they were not able to find much usable evidence. Terri's friends were interviewed and cleared, and the case seemed to hit an end until 3 months later. While investigating a case where a man had fired a shotgun into a former girlfriend's house, the police were able to connect a white Chevy Nova, a 20-gauge shotgun, and other evidence to establish a suspect in Terri's case. Though circumstantial evidence seemed to point to the Nova's driver, an exhaustive search of the vehicle produced no proof Terri had ever been in it. Then the case went cold. After more than 40 years, on January 11, 2025, officers with the Longview, Washington Police Department arrested the suspect Thomas Dwayne Popp in Cowlitz County, Washington. Woodbury County Attorney James Loomis said that a grand jury indicted Popp on one count of first-degree slaying. He is in custody in the Cowlitz County Jail in Washington State on $750,000 bond. The McCauley family held a press conference to talk about the breakthrough in Terri's case. Josh Taylor, Terri's nephew, said, "Today has been a roller coaster, if you can imagine." A day after hearing the news that the Washington state authorities had arrested a suspect, the McCauley family is still processing the shocking news. 4 decades after the crime happened, the McCauley family was not sure if anything would ever be found. Josh said, "None of it felt real. Even up until this morning felt like fog. You just do not know until you get that solidified confirmation of what is going on." The McCauley family thanked law enforcement for the time they put in on the case and commended Woodbury County's attorney. Tricia Rivers with Great Plains Action Society said, "James Loomis has done an excellent job. He gave us his word, he followed through, and we are just more than grateful for that, because in many cases, like this, that is not what we see, especially coming from the Native community." Organizations in the area like Great Plains Action Agency and Women Now helped raise awareness of Terri's case and others. The family is grateful a suspect is in custody, but wants to raise awareness for similar cases. Josh said, "I hope this brings hope to those families, that one day their loved one will get answers as well." He added, "For quite some time we felt somewhat hopeless, and it felt like that nothing would ever come out of our efforts. Even now, with the time I have had to process it, it is still hard to put together a whole sentence because you are full of emotion. We are extremely grateful to those who helped us with the case. From the stories I have been told, she was very outgoing and she loved her 2 kids. It is heartbreaking to put together words how the whole family is feeling." A man is behind bars and will likely face extradition after his arrest over a woman's end more than 2 decades ago. An Australian woman, Meaghan Rose's lifeless body would be discovered. After a false ruling, the case would be reopened and lead to a close acquaintance. On July 18, 1997, 25-year-old disability and aged care nursing assistant Meaghan Louise Rose was discovered deceased at the base of Point Cartwright Cliffs on Queensland's Sunshine Coast in Australia. It was initially ruled that Meaghan took her own life due to a high blood alcohol concentration. But 25 years later, in 2022, the investigation was reopened and a $500,000 reward for information was announced in June 2023. Queensland detectives said that they traveled to Victoria and spoke to Meaghan's former partner before his car was found abandoned the next day at Portland in the state's southwest. He allegedly gave a false name when spoken to by other officers at Port Fairy, but was spotted again on CCTV at the Warren Ponds shopping center in Geelong, where he bought new clothes, before the last sighting of him at the Shepparton train station. The following month, in July, an arrest warrant was issued, but 72-year-old Keith Lees spent about 18 months evading it. Finally, on January 2nd, 2025, Lees was arrested at Kenhurst Road in Dural, in Sydney's northwest, after a community member recognized him as a person the police were seeking. He was refused bail in a Sydney court the following day and will remain in custody. Relatives of Meaghan had previously urged Lees to comply with the interstate arrest warrant. Meaghan's older sister, Christine Richards, said, "Help us to bring justice for Meaghan after all this time. Please help us let her rest in peace." In addition to his apprehension on the warrant, he was charged with assaulting the police, dealing with identity information to commit an indictable offense, and possessing identity information to commit an indictable offense. He tried to bite an officer while he was in custody. The Queensland Police have applied for Lee's extradition and to dismiss the assault and identity charges. 1 week later, he arrived at Brisbane Domestic Airport, flanked by the police. Dressed in a black shirt and sporting a long white beard, he looked remarkably different to photos issued by police in relation to their probe of Meaghan's end. The police believe there could be more people with vital information. Detective Senior Sergeant Kentwell said, "It is never too late to come forward. Relationships and loyalties change. People who were once scared may no longer be, and we would encourage those people to come forward." The police have arrested a suspect in the unsolved case of a Honolulu, Hawaii teenager whose demise rocked the high school where her body was discovered almost 5 decades ago. DNA tests would lead to possible suspects who could have taken the life of Dawn Momohara. On March 20th, 1977, 16-year-old Dawn Momohara left home, telling her mother she was going to meet friends at a shopping center in Honolulu, Hawaii. Hours later, after Dawn did not return home that afternoon, she was reported missing. The following morning, just before students began Monday morning classes, Dawn was found deceased. She was found on the 2nd floor of the English building at McKinley High School in Honolulu. She was a student there in her sophomore year. The officers at the time showed up to a gruesome scene. Dawn was partially clothed and lying on her back with an orange cloth tied around her neck. A subsequent autopsy ruled that Dawn was strangled to her end, and the medical examiner said that there were signs of assault. The only lead that the police had early on in the investigation was a description of a man and a car that were seen by a witness in the high school parking lot on the night Dawn disappeared. In the weeks after her demise, the Honolulu police stopped and checked all the vehicles that looked like what the witness described as a maroon and white Pontiac sedan. The police also canvassed the neighborhood, carrying around photographs of Dawn, and asked residents if they had seen her on the Sunday she left to go shopping. It was not clear whether she ever made it to the Ala Moana Center, where she told her mother she was going to meet with friends. No leads emerged, and although the police retrieved an unknown man's DNA sample from the teenager's shorts, they could not identify a suspect, and the case went cold. The authorities would not develop meaningful leads in the case until more than 4 decades later, in 2020. A cold case detective resubmitted evidence for forensic exams using updated technology. By September 2023, 3 years later, the DNA tests led investigators to 2 possible suspects: brothers Gideon Castro and William Castro, who had both been interviewed in the immediate aftermath of Dawn's slaying. Back then, Gideon Castro told the police that he met Dawn at a school dance in 1976, just before he graduated. William Castro in those interviews said that he and Dawn periodically talked on the phone, but denied ever being in any kind of relationship with her. Once forensic tests narrowed down the pool of potential suspects to the Castro brothers, Lieutenant Dina Temes said that the police traveled to Chicago. William Castro lives there, and they wanted to obtain a DNA sample secretly from one of his adult children and use it as a comparison. The comparison then excluded William as a suspect. They then did the same with Gideon Castro and traveled to Utah to obtain a DNA sample from his adult children and finally found a match. On January 21, 2025, almost 5 decades after the crime took place, 66-year-old Gideon Castro was arrested at his nursing home in Utah on a second-degree slaying charge. He was one of Dawn's former schoolmates who joined the U.S. Army Reserve after graduating. He will be extradited back to Honolulu. Lieutenant Temes said, "On behalf of the Honolulu Police Department, I want to thank all the individuals and agencies that made today's arrest possible. Thank you for all your dedication and commitment to the tireless pursuit of justice for Dawn and the Momohara family." Utah Cold Case Coalition co-founder Kara Porter said, "There is not enough money to do DNA testing on anywhere near all of the cold cases, but when it can be done, it is very reliable." Porter said that she has studied what happens to suspects carrying secrets like an unconfessed crime for years. She said, "A lot of people, this eats away at them. Sometimes physically, they just deteriorate." She said some people live life as if nothing happened. Some people commit a heinous crime. I guess it has such an impact on them that they never commit another one, but they also do not necessarily feel guilty about the first one. She added, maybe they excuse it with, "I was young," or "I made a mistake," or "I was drunk," or whatever. Sheriff's detectives on the Treasure Coast have made an arrest in a cold case that happened a quarter-century ago near Fort Pierce, Florida. A happy couple's lives would be taken after they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. A keychain with a photo of a young girl would bring the necessary breakthrough. In October 2000, 77-year-old Robert Hardwick and 58-year-old Vernice Reese had been planning to get married. Unfortunately, a tragic crime hindered their plans. On October 22nd, Robert and Vernice were stabbed to their end. Their double-story house on Kings Highway, south of Indrio Road in Fort Pierce, Florida, was set on fire. After the house fire was extinguished, the bodies were found inside. The detectives believed that the perpetrator stabbed the couple and used gasoline to burn the home down and get rid of all evidence. There was no soot or smoke in their lungs, so they lost their lives before the fire was started. Robert's car, an Oldsmobile Alero, was then stolen and later found in Wilton Manors in Broward County. A longtime employee of Robert contacted the police and indicated that the day before the fire was reported, Robert heard someone downstairs at his house. When he went downstairs, he found a Hispanic male wandering around inside of his garage. The employee then came to the home, and the man told Robert that his truck had broken down. The employee gave the man a ride to what then was an Eckerd substance store at Kings Highway and Indio Road, about a mile from the home. DNA and other evidence were collected at the scene, but unfortunately, the case went cold. 23 years later, in 2023, St. Lucie County Sheriff's Detective Paul Taylor took a new look at the case. He said, "We went through, started organizing things, and we sent a bunch of things off for DNA. DNA advances were credited with helping track down the suspect." Detective Taylor said, "A lot of the witnesses that they tried to speak to back then really just did not cooperate. Now, they have come forward with more information. I found new witnesses that have come forward that I have talked to. What investigators learned from witnesses and phone records was that the couple arrived home from dinner and Robert was going to go to bed. Vernice was about to head out to a birthday party when she decided to go back into the house and give Robert his medication before bed. but she made one last phone call to a family member to say that she heard Robert arguing with another man upstairs. Then the phone line got cut off. The investigators believe that Robert was possibly going for his gun in the bedroom when the perpetrator stabbed him, before later stabbing Vernice and leaving her at the top of the stairs and setting the place on fire with gasoline. There is solid evidence tying 58-year-old Julian Romero to the double slaying. Detective Taylor explained, "We have got witnesses that said he was there. So now also we have DNA recovered from the scene of the fire of the slayings. We have his DNA recovered there. We have his DNA recovered in the car." Richard Del Toro, St. Lucie County Sheriff, is applauding the work of his detectives. "I think it is so important to realize when a fresh set of eyes get on these cases, you can see things that were not seen before." In January 2025, Honduran citizen Romero were charged with 2 counts of first-degree slaying. He is in the country illegally and has an ICE detainer. At the time of his arrest, he was already behind bars. He is serving a life sentence since August 2002 in an unrelated case from Broward County on charges of assault and kidnapping. He is behind bars at the St. Lucie County Jail. He was arrested for the crime he is serving now, after being found sleeping in Robert's car. In searching the car and property Romero said was his, the investigators turned up a can of pepper spray in a bag in the trunk. A bloody fingerprint on it was recently determined to belong to Robert. It is assumed that Romero was only trying to steal the car after he saw it the previous day when he was in the garage, but then got confronted by Robert and Vernice, and it went bad. The big break came when the detectives determined that a photo of a girl on a keychain found in the victim's stolen car was that of the suspect's daughter. Detective Taylor said, "I think even the state attorney, whenever I told him about this keychain, and he was like, 'You have got to be kidding me. Come to my office right now,'" he added. His story was, "I just climbed in there to take a nap for a couple hours. If you are climbing in there to take a nap for a couple hours, why would you take the keys out of the ignition and put your daughter's picture on it?" Detective Taylor described his reaction to having the case solved. "It is fantastic. It is a great feeling. This is a double slaying and it is 25 years old." A man went missing in 2022 in Oregon. 2 men would be arrested years later after witnesses came forward. In February 2022, car dealership owner Ryan David Staggs was reported as a missing person. He was last seen on January 29th at his home at 175 Northwest 55th Street in Newport, Oregon. The investigators received numerous pieces of information, but nothing led to the location of Ryan, and the case went cold. The breakthrough finally came almost 3 years later. On December 27, 2024, a search warrant was executed in the 200 block of Northwest 7th Street in Newport at the home of 60-year-old Jack David Baird. 3 days earlier, witnesses came forward, saying that Baird was seen at Ryan's home the day after he went missing. They also claimed that Baird was digging in his own backyard with a backhoe. The police were able to confirm that Baird had rented a backhoe 2 days after Ryan's disappearance. During the search of Baird's property, cadaver canines alerted to the scent of human remains in the ground soil removed from the backyard. An extensive search was conducted. However, no human remains were recovered. Through the execution of the search warrant, additional information and witnesses were identified, and the investigation continued. Baird was still arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse, and a probable cause affidavit linked the arrest to Ryan's disappearance, adding that neighbors heard him screaming at his home the day he disappeared. 2 weeks later, on January 9th, 2025, 54-year-old Murphy Henry was arrested and also charged with abuse of a corpse, slaying in the second degree, and tampering with evidence. This arrest took place after remains were found at a shallow grave site in remote Lincoln County. The remains are believed to be Ryan's, but the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office is still examining the remains. The Buffalo Police have made an arrest in connection with a cold case out of Chautauqua County, New York. Marquita Mull went missing for 3 months, was found, and then a breakthrough led to the perpetrator more than 3 years later. In September 2021, 50-year-old Marquita Mull's body was discovered along a hiking trail in the town of Portland in Chautauqua County, New York. Marquita's remains were found while Chautauqua County investigators were searching the trail following the discovery of other skeletal remains. They were found 10 yards apart. The last time she was seen was June 25, 2021, in the Broadway-Fillmore area. The detectives followed up on all available leads, but they could not identify the person responsible for taking Marquita's life. Finally, an extensive joint investigation resulted in Chautauqua County deputies locating a person of interest. On January 7, 2025, 61-year-old Richard Fox was charged with slaying. He was located at a residence in Niagara Falls, New York, and taken into custody. Buffalo Police Commissioner Joseph Gramaglia, Erie County District Attorney Michael Keene, and Chautauqua County Sheriff James Quattrone joined together for the announcement. Gramaglia and Quattrone credited the teamwork between agencies to make the arrest. Gramaglia said, "There was a lot of work that was done in this joint investigation. The Chautauqua deputies were down in our building, working with our investigators quite frequently. There is a lot of trips that were made to Buffalo, and they were working this investigation rather doggedly." Quattrone said, "When our agency reached out to Buffalo Police Department, that has been nothing but total cooperation, a great network." Fox faces a maximum sentence of 25 years to life in prison if he is convicted. He is being held without bail. District Attorney Mike Keene said, "As a result of the diligent and collaborative work of this multi-agency investigation, I am pleased to announce the arrest of this defendant. While this remains an active case, and we continue to seek more information, I want to applaud the many dedicated members of law enforcement. The family of Marquita Mull has waited more than 4 years for answers, and we are committed to obtaining justice for the victim and her family." Marquita's sister, Wendy Mull, was overcome with gratitude after the announcement, hugging investigators and law enforcement in the lobby of the police department headquarters. Wendy said the following as she hugged Sheriff Quattrone, "I will never forget you. Thank you so much." While the arrest does not bring Wendy's sister back, she said it brings her family one step closer to justice. She said, "It is bittersweet. She is not here, but he is like, I mean, when he was being arraigned, I sat right behind him. You cannot get any closer. I do not even hate the man. I am not his judge. God is his judge. We cannot judge anybody. God can."